now we will turn to Europe and to the Arctic states for their perspectives on this new frontier, as it were. Not necessarily new for the European and Arctic states, but certainly there are new textures to this region brought out by changes both in terms of climate change, as we have heard, but also the geopolitical changes that are underway, both in terms of old partnerships and old and new rivalries. And in this backdrop, I thought perhaps we could structure the session in a manner that we could give you each 2 to 3 minutes as maybe an opening intervention, where you could bring out a couple of ideas for us to consider. And then I could possibly pose a couple of questions or a couple of round of questions to each one of you if I believe you've not been sufficiently provocative in your responses, or you have eluded responding to some issues that many of us would want to discuss in Asia. And as Ambassador Petri mentioned to me outside, he will skillfully avoid answering anything he finds uncomfortable. So that option exists with you. And finally, I would like to leave at least 10 to 15 minutes to pick up 4 or 5 questions from all of you here. But certainly from my young friends at the back of the room, I want to bring you in. So please be ready with your questions. You can pose it to our friends who are most concerned with this region. So let me start with you, Ambassador Petri. Your opening comments on some fresh perspectives on this new frontier.
Thank you very much. I didn't say skillfully avoid. I said I will try to wiggle my way out of the questions that I can't answer. Firstly, let me just thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here in India. The title of this session is Perspectives from Arctic and European States. That's an interesting one for a representative of Finland to sit in. I represent an Arctic states. There are only 8 Arctic states in the world. The region is the size of the African continent. And the Arctic states and the Arctic Council are a key part of the governance in the Arctic. I also represent the happiest country in the world for the 6th time in a row, although I belong to the melancholic minority in that country. But in addition to that, Finland, of course, also is a European country, and we are a member of the European Union. So there are several perspectives. And perhaps a third characterization of Finland, and picking up on what the Korean ambassador referred to, the icebreakers. On the issue of icebreakers, Finland truly is a global superpower. Mm-hmm. The 80% of all the icebreakers in the world have been designed by Finnish shipyards. 60% of all the icebreakers in the world have been built in the Finnish shipyards. And I think the recently signed Ice Pact partnership with the United States and Canada will further enhance our abilities in that regard. Let me say that on Monday, me and several of my colleagues will fly directly from here to Rovaniemi in the northern part of Finland to attend the Arctic Spirits conference, where we sit in a panel. And I think this travel, in a nice way, it demonstrates that this really is an issue for the whole world. It's a topical issue here in India. India is a key partner in the Arctic cooperation. India has much to contribute. India is a very active observer in the Arctic Council. India has resources, India has knowledge, and there's much to be gained from further constructive cooperation. And I firmly believe that we Arctic states, we need to reach out more to our colleagues outside the region to build partnerships, to engage in bona fide cooperation, and initiate cooperation for mutual benefit and for the benefit of the Arctic region and the whole world. And I think this meeting also confirms the convening power of the Arctic Circle. And my respect and full appreciation to President Crimson for his efforts over the years and decades. it is extremely fascinating for a representative of an Arctic state to sit at these gatherings, this time here in India and elsewhere. Although I must say that as an Arctic state, it sometimes feels like I'm attending a medical conference where the topic of discussion is my health. Slightly scary at times. But I conclude by picking up on a few things that were said earlier. Dr. Mir said that climate, that the Arctic region does not belong to the Arctic states anymore. I think when the 8 Arctic states hear that statement, they would collectively go, excuse me? And I would respectfully disagree with that notion. But as I said, this does not and cannot mean that there is no cooperation. The cooperation is needed, the partnership is needed. But the Arctic region is our home. It is home for the people in the Arctic, including and in particular the indigenous people. And the Arctic states and the Arctic Council have a key role to play in the Arctic governance. And the second point to make on the Danish kingdom referred to the role of observers. Now, there might be some diverging views among the 8, but I can say here that in my opinion, the Arctic Council could and should do more. We could be more innovative on how we engage with our observers to make sure that their views and inputs are taken into account. So there's potential for future cooperation. Sorry if that was over 2 minutes.
No, that's perfect. Ambassador Reichlich, can I turn to you?
Sure, thank you very much. And let me start by thanking distinguished President Grimson and all the colleagues from the Arctic Circle for bringing us to New Delhi. This perhaps might be the first meeting of this kind in India, but this brings back also to my memory last year Antarctic Treaty meeting in Kochi, where all of our states represented here at stage were represented as consultative parties. And let me take this opportunity to thank my Indian friends for exceptional hospitality and also great guidance and chairing of this meeting. Yes, Poland is not an Arctic state, it's an observer state in the Arctic Council. We've been observing Arctic Council works since 1998, so we are one of the first observers, and we feel very close to the region in many domains. Already after regaining of our independence more than 100 years ago, first expeditions, scientific expeditions to the Arctic were organized. As it's been already mentioned today in the morning, we live in turbulent times, and in such challenging period, we stick to activities which we know how to undertake. We develop our scientific activity in the Arctic. There was a scientific consortium created in Poland, consisting of 11 universities and 5 other scientific institutes. This consortium has recently opened a logistics center in Svalbard in Norway in January this year, just to help logistics in the Arctic, in Svalbard, reduce transport costs and so on. And we are now holding presidency in the Council of the European Union, and this presidency is very much focused on security. But as it was also mentioned by Ambassador Petteri, only one aspect, 1 out of 7, deals with specifically military aspects. The other ones are like health security, business development, energy security in Europe and so on. What we are trying to do is also to facilitate somehow the dialogue between the Arctic Council and the observers, as it was mentioned by Torsten in the morning. Thank you very much for that. We organize on an annual basis the so-called Warsaw format meeting, when the current chairship of the council meets observer states, and I'm very grateful to all friends from the Arctic Council and Arctic Council Secretariat for their willingness to continue this practice. I will stop
Thank you.
here.
Special Envoy Pinna, can I turn to you?
Yes, thank you very much. I also would like to thank President Grimson and the Indian Observer Research Foundation for hosting this very nice event here in Delhi. For me, it was also a great occasion to come back to India after many years. Where I worked here almost 20 years ago. And one of the reasons why I'm here is also to say that about the decision of the Italian government, the Italian MFA, the Italian Ministry of University and Research, to host the next Arctic Circle Forum in Rome. It will be in the first quarter of 2026. And so we are very happy that we will follow India, and this is also a sign of the growing engagement of non-Arctic countries in the Arctic affairs. This will mark certainly a milestone in the Italy engagement in the Arctic, because it will be the first event of such kind that we will organize in Italy. Italy also has a tradition of attraction, friendship towards the Arctic. We are a small India, maybe geographically, because we are a country of sea, a country of glacier. We have the Alps, we have the Mediterranean, and because of that, two fundamental elements of the Arctic are in our territory, and this helped us in developing our expertise, our knowledge, scientific competence on the Arctic, and we have a very engaged scientific community in Italy, a polar scientific community dealing with Antarctica, but also with Arctic. And of course, this is not a new engagement. So we had the first expedition in the Arctic almost 100 years ago. Next year we will celebrate the centenary of the Dirigibile Norge polar exhibition led by Umberto Nobile and Roald Amundsen, which is an enduring symbol of international cooperation in the Arctic. We have the scientific base, Italian, in the Svalbard Island called Dirigibile Italia. We have also a significant presence with the Upper Atmosphere Observatory in Greenland, in Pitufik. This is also a significant presence. And we have also a growing interest of the Italian Navy. We being a maritime, let's say, power, Italy is looking at the Arctic in terms of freedom of navigation, safety of navigation. And we have the Hydrographic Institute of the Italian Navy is organizing every summer a research campaign in the Arctic, usually between the Svalbard and Greenland. And we are going to continue these efforts, and we are building also a new vessel in order to be more present in the coming years in the Arctic for research. So research is the main driver of our engagement in the Arctic, but we are now updating our national documents, the Italian strategy for the Arctic. Of course, we will address other issues as well. Of course, the security, of course, the preparedness, resilience, connectivity. So we have to think about the Arctic in a more comprehensive way. So I think the approach we had before, more based on climate change and sustainable development, is still very much the case, but it's no longer the only thing that we have to address. So we will enlarge our profile, we will enhance our profile in the Arctic, and we will try to see this region in a more comprehensive way, because there are many interconnected issues that we have to solve, involving also together with the non-Arctic state. And we also welcome very much this event and the interest of Asian countries in the Arctic. We recently had an event in Rome, a bilateral event with Japan, so about our Arctic collaboration, and for that certainly we are ready to contribute more and more, and to play as a non-Arctic state a bigger role in the Arctic governance.
No, thank you. I think that first round of opening statements makes it quite clear that each of you on the stage and the countries in Europe are committed to the region, are invested in the region, are familiar with the region. And of course, from climate change to now the security aspects, we have heard the interventions elaborate on issues that matter. But let me ask you a more pointed and direct question, which in many ways affects both the non-traditional security aspects that were elaborated this morning in the previous interventions, but also the security questions, which currently the European continent is grappling with. And maybe for the audience in Asia, in India, and those who are watching us online, it would be useful to ask you this question, that how does Arctic governance and the Arctic Council continue to remain vital and relevant when the Council is itself divided by the absence of a member from conversations with the other 7? How is the Ukraine conflict or the situation in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, complicating the ability for Arctic governance more broadly, for European participation more specifically, and for the Arctic Circle states? By the way, like you mentioned, 7 of them are not only part of NATO and the EU, but also a few of them are recent NATO members who have in many ways been catalyzed by what has happened recently. So maybe Ambassador Petri, and by the way, I understand your sentiment on ownership. We have an ocean named after us in India, and we also feel that affinity, but we sometimes need to find partnerships to do better for the ocean and for the region. But coming back to the security question, how do we respond to the situation in Europe today with the broader consensus on creating frameworks for the future in the Arctic region itself?
Thank you. In fact, you asked a question which has probably 20 sub-questions, and there are various ways to approach this. But I will try with 3 points. When Russia brutally attacked Ukraine in February of 22, in the subsequent months and the year, the world outside the region was convinced that the story of 3 decades of the Arctic Council was dead. I remember having been in Reykjavik at the Arctic Circle Assembly, I believe in 22 or 23, where that was the message that everybody repeated. Now I'm peaceful, amicable Finn, unable to display any emotions, but I got really upset by that, and did make my views known in one of the sessions in Reykjavik. But the reason why we survived, I don't know if there are any Norwegians in the audience. If there are, congratulate yourselves. It was because of the courage, determination, skill, and a vision that Norway had as the chair of the Arctic Council in a very, very difficult time period. They pushed us, they steered us, they led us, they negotiated with us on sort of successive steps that we took, which has led to a situation where we are today, where the Arctic Council is operating. projects are being implemented. It's not business as usual, but it is doing great and valuable work. Now, a lot of responsibility now sits in the hands of my good colleagues from the Kingdom of Denmark, that they manage to do the same thing. It's not an easy ride, and it will not be an easy ride. The second point to make, that of course, Finland's and Sweden's accession to NATO changed the reality in more ways than one. The Arctic region and the Baltic Sea region are strategically connected, and Finland rests in between these two with 1,300 kilometers of common border with the Russian Federation. So the whole military security, preparedness, resilience, security of supply, transport routes, capabilities, and all of this has become enormously important aspect of Arctic cooperation and will continue to do that. Third last point, however, is that we need to balance that with everything else which is there in the Arctic, so that the military aspects don't overwhelm everything which is important in the Arctic region, ranging from the climate change, welfare of the people, indigenous people, scientific research, sea routes, sustainable development. The list is endless. And it occurred to me at one point that when one sort of analytically looks at military security, in certain sense, it is speculation. It is speculation on the basis of what we conceive that the adversary might do or will do. And in response, we build up our resilience and our capabilities. And we continue to do that, and that's very important. But the climate change is not speculation. It's a scientific fact. It is happening fast, and it is accelerating as we speak. We need to stop and think what the world would be, what the 3-degree world would be like. And we've heard from our Asian friends the impact on their corner of the world. But we should not be complacent, think that this will be a gradual process, that we just follow that it keeps getting warmer and the sea levels rise, because we have to allow for the possibility that some of the changes may be abrupt. We cross a tipping point which runs the risk of a cascading effect on other tipping points. And then we can no longer do anything. It doesn't matter what we do. And everybody focused on the Arctic, we need to keep in mind our own sons and daughters. It's their world that we're trying to save. And we need concerted action. We need cooperation between the Arctic states and our colleagues in the rest of the world.
Ambassador Reichlich, can I come to you?
Yeah, sure. Of course, I joined the voice of Petteri, and we as a country neighboring both Russia and Ukraine are, of course, mostly interested in a peaceful solution and ending of this war. It is also obvious that Russia is a crucial state for Arctic cooperation, more than 50% in terms of territory of the Arctic. But in current circumstances, after Russian aggression on Ukraine, the cooperation needed to be limited. But of course, we are not happy about that. We would like to see Russia as a responsible state engaged in constructive cooperation at international level. Instead, they invaded brutally their neighbor. It makes us invest more in our military capabilities, and it's not a matter of our will, but it's a matter of our of the necessity. Yes, we have too much experience, historical experience concerning that. And of course, some people say that the Arctic Council can serve as a platform of soft influence maybe on Russia, or engaging Russia in cooperation, that this may be the first maybe area or forum of normalization of relations. We'll see, but what we as Poland try to warn our friends is that we should rather not isolate cooperation in the Arctic Council from what's happening elsewhere, because this just doesn't serve a peaceful solution.
But Ambassador, I want to ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
I think there are many outside of that region, because obviously we don't have the immediacy of the conflict, and I recognize that. We are not an affected party. But many believe that certain councils and certain collaborative mechanisms must be immune from the vagaries of politics and war.
Sure.
For example, we worked very hard in the global south to make the G20 survive, just as Norway worked hard to keep the Arctic Council alive. India, Brazil, Indonesia, and now South Africa are fighting very hard for the G20 to continue to remain relevant. So some would argue, contrary to your position, that some councils must continue to do their work for responding to climate, for responding to development goals, for responding for the greater good of humanity.
Absolutely, we have few challenges and threats in the Arctic which are common. Threats coming from the Arctic, environmental climate threats, will just not step at certain borders. There are common threats, so they need also a common approach. That's why we need all the actors. And of course, here I can agree. But on the other hand, what we know very well, if some partners are of the opinion that coming maybe to business as usual in some forums will help solving problems in other areas, we are afraid this may not happen, knowing the attitude of Russia. Despite we are a neighbor with quite a bad experience in recent decades, we were very open already in 21st century towards good cooperation, good friendly neighbor relations with Russia. Russian foreign minister was a guest of our ambassadors conference. Our foreign minister, acting as a chair of the OSCE, just 2 weeks before the Russian invasion, visited Moscow, trying to somehow address their concerns. But the outcome is obvious.
Last week you hosted a very important conference of the EU on the Indo-Pacific as the presidency of the European Union Council.
Exactly.
I was there last week, and I had the pleasure of being there. But I'm going to just turn to you, Ambassador. I want to turn to Special Envoy, and I'll come back to you for an intervention to add to what we just heard. But let me turn to the Special Envoy, Ambassador Richlik. Ambassador Special Envoy Pinna. Sorry, there are too many terminologies. But let me turn to you, Mr. Pinna.
Yes, no, thank you. So I would like also to commend the work of the President of Norway of the Arctic Council, because I think they have done a very good job, an excellent job in keeping alive, in navigating in troubled waters, and assuring the continuation of the activity of the Arctic Council. Sometimes I'm also reading in researchers or specialists of the Arctic in the in Italy or elsewhere, so, writing that the Arctic Council is dead. We must avoid such narrative, because it's not true. So the Arctic Council is alive. Of course, is suffering, but is still continuing its activity. So Italy is supporting. So we think that the time maybe is mature, as maybe was mentioned during this conference, to have greater role of the non-Arctic Council in the governance, because maybe they will help the Arctic Council to transform, to evolve, to survive still better in the coming years, which will remain probably difficult. I think President Grimson was right talking about the elephants, so we know about that. So for that, we think that this is an important instrument the Arctic Council has to preserve, has to be transformed. Maybe this is would be the will of the members, but there is a growing interest internationally of the non-Arctic countries in playing more and being considered, so to be more active, and I think that the position of the non-Arctic countries very often coincides. There are maybe can be slight differences, but there is a general willingness in being more involved in the governance of the region.
Thank you. Ambassador Petri, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick note to Piotr's insightful views, just to agree with him that business as usual is not really a feasible option in the foreseeable future. What we need to have is a functioning modus operandi that ensures the operational viability of the Council and its role and everything else that has to do with the Arctic region. So it's in a certain sense a balancing act, but everything in the circumpolar Arctic is a balancing act. We're balancing between business interests and climate change. We are balancing between indigenous people's rights and other views. We are balancing between military cooperation priority versus other things on scientific cooperation. I mean, the whole art of Arctic decision making or policy making is about being able to find the right and very delicate balance between objectives which might be prima facie even contradictory.
Okay, so let me ask you about another balancing act that the Arctic now needs to engage in. Donald Trump. Right? So now I really want your view on the transatlantic relationship, especially because there are two big questions here: security, and you see conversations happening between the US and Russia, which are independent and bilateral, and how does that change the political dynamics in the Union as well as in the Arctic. But more importantly, since a few of us this morning have brought out the issue of climate change, and you know what the view in Washington DC is about climate change, how do you make that a priority of cooperation with your transatlantic partner, and how does that feature in the calculus going ahead? So let me start this time with Special Envoy Pinna. I think your leader was the most recent one to meet President Trump. How does the transatlantic relationship change or affect or impact or shape the future of what Europe may do in the Arctic region?
I suppose the shortest answer is too early to say. It's not my job to comment on the thinking of another Arctic partner. I have a full-time job trying to explain my own country's thinking. But I believe that if one reads the statements that the new administration has made, one way to interpret that is that the Arctic will continue to remain a key priority for the United States for a whole host of different reasons. I earlier referred to the ice pact between Finland, Canada, and the United States on icebreakers. That's one indication of it. And I think we all eagerly await for the new administration to nominate a new Arctic ambassador following Mike Schreger's departure. The United States does have a senior Arctic official, so I have a colleague there also to talk to. But in my understanding, the sort of top-down analysis in Washington on everything that they are engaged in is still underway, and we will see the conclusions that they reach. But these sort of developments, together with Russia's brutal war of aggression on Ukraine and other things, they don't make Arctic cooperation easier, but we will pull through, I'm convinced, because there's no other option but to pull through.
Mr. Pinna, can I turn to you?
Yes, just so to add that maybe one positive thing is that the United States are considering the Arctic more and more strategic, so it will mean that they will pay more and more attention to the Arctic. This is maybe also a positive development, and so as an ally, as a partner of the United States, so we have to assure that they will also continue to think about the sustainability, about one of the main issue of the Arctic is the principle of the concept of sustainability, sustainable development, etc. So we have to assure that the United States will remain committed to these ideas, to this principle, because without them, of course, to have a cooperation, a framework of cooperation in the Arctic will be more difficult. So this is our mission now, is to engage them in such dialogue on sustainability.
Thank you. Would you like to come in on this?
Just very briefly.
Yeah.
I think that this narrative of the new administration and some steps might be shocking for some people, but I believe that eventually they will have a positive and sobering effect for Europe. And my prime minister has recently stated that it's a paradoxical situation when 500 million Europeans ask 300 million Americans to deal with 100 million Russians. Yes, so that's a paradox. Our cooperation, our bilateral cooperation is going on. Defense sector is very much engaged, but also scientists. Our polar scientists are also cooperating, for example, within NASA. So. And when it comes to the most difficult aspects, I think it's worth reminding a part of Ottawa Declaration, where Arctic Council members ask other states to respect and recognize the sovereignty of Arctic states in the Arctic. So I think it should work both ways.
Okay, good. We have 11 minutes. I want to bring, sorry.
Can I add?
Very quickly.
I speak fast. May 23, when people were thinking the Arctic Council is dead, the 8 governments and 6 permanent indigenous peoples organizations negotiated and released a joint statement, which was a surprise to many and an achievement, I believe. The 8 governments and 6 indigenous peoples organizations are negotiating and hopefully will release a joint statement on the 12th of May, when the chairship is transferred from Norway to the Kingdom of Denmark. The content of that joint statement will then indicate to the rest of the world the content of how we see the current situation with all the changes.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it to you guys now. I'm going to bring some of the young folks from the back of the room in, because I know you have been raising your hand since the morning. I want to give you an opportunity. Please bring the mics there. And then I'm not excluding those in front, but I also want to include those who are sitting behind. So can we pick up 3 questions in a row, and then we'll turn to you? Can we club them together? Because there are quite a few hands there.
Yeah.
Okay, precise and short questions.
Great. So hello, gentlemen and ladies. My question here is that, as we Ambassador Petri did mention about the balancing act. So what are we doing to safeguard Arctic as a global commons, understanding its growing role in scientific cooperation and also climate stewardship, vis-a-vis navigating its ballooning role in energy security and maritime geopolitics. So this is my question to Ambassador Petri. Thank you so much.
Hello, sir. My name is Vikrant Sharma. My question is the how do strategic interest of Arctic state is differ from the non-Arctic European state in the shaping future of Arctic, and what tension arise from differing priorities?
Okay, different priorities of non-Arctic countries and how do they challenge the Arctic agenda more broadly? I think that was a question. Let's turn to all three of you, and I'll come with the second round if we have time, but let me start with you, Ambassador Poiter. Let me start with you first. Go ahead. No, let me turn to
So I will
Poiter
maybe address
first.
the second question because the first one was addressed to
Yeah,
Petteri.
correct.
So I'm not sure if I caught it correctly, but it was about European also engagement, I think, in and EU in the Arctic. Yes.
Yes. No, I mean there's a dispute between Canada and Russia. That was a question. And where is the European community tilting on the western and eastern spaces?
Yeah. Well. I think there are a lot of disputes among Arctic Council members at the moment, and of course we as a European Union advise all parties to just stick to international law. We have it. It works sometimes better, sometimes worse, but we believe we should respect it because if we lose what we already have. Then as a substitution, I don't think we will have anything better.
Okay.
So that's my short response.
Mr. Pinna?
Yes, I also agree. So we think that so the European agenda is very much focused on a prosperous and safe Arctic. So we are against militarization or nationalization of the Arctic, and so of course this dispute have to be solved peacefully, and so the general approach is always that to keep low level of tension in the Arctic, and so to increase cooperation as much as possible in every circumstances. So I don't think that we can have a different approach. So, for example, as I was mentioned before, for Italy, so to keep the Arctic Ocean free, so the respect of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is very much part of our vision of the Arctic, and so how the Arctic is connected with the Atlantic, with the Pacific. We have to preserve this area as a free areas without. So preventing and fighting against attempts of certain countries to nationalize the region. So.
Ambassador Petri, you had a couple of questions specifically directed towards you, I think, out of the three interventions.
Well, thank you. Answering these questions would take a couple of research seminars. Sort of quick answer is through negotiations. I mean, Finland is an Arctic state, so we negotiate with the Arctic states. Finland is also a member of the European Union, so we are a key partner in designing EU decisions. In the event that there's a difference between the two, we will continue to negotiate in both formats. I'm not sure what else I could possibly say on the hypothetical question, but I do wish to underline the fact that the circumpolar Arctic is, after all, a well-governed region. It's either sea and land territories of 8 sovereign states, or which are complemented by provisions of international law, first and foremost, UNCLOS. And I think the BBNJ agreement hopefully will enter into force later this year, so we will have a further legal instrument for the protection of the Central Arctic Ocean. So there are no open territorial disputes. The disagreements on the continental shelves continue to be constructively addressed in the context of UNCLOS. And I think the real big issue will be the two sea lanes, if and when they open and traffic increases. There are issues pertaining to the interpretation of UNCLOS that would need to be sorted out.
Just a very quick follow-up, Ambassador Pitri. What about the question on the conflicting interests of Arctic versus non-Arctic? For example, connectivity projects and you know the military assessments and security assessments of that region. Maybe some of them partnering with one of the Arctic member states, not all of them. For example, the corridors through the eastern route via Russia.
Well, again, it's the art of negotiations, which will continue to be important here. The Arctic states will defend their views. Finland will defend views of the Arctic states formulated in the context of the Arctic Council. As member state of the European Union, Finland will defend the views formulated in the context of the European Union. I don't have any other magic stick in my pocket than diplomacy and negotiations and a firm commitment to reach mutually beneficial solutions to the problems that we face and which we will continue to face probably in an increasing fashion.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions. We have just 2 minutes left. Let's go to the hands there at the back of the room there. And or maybe we can go to this side now. Let's go here, on this side of the room. Go ahead. There's a lady there. Please take the mic. Pose your question.
Hello, I'm Shweta, PhD student at the Center for European Studies. My question is related to the European Union. So EU intends to play a greater role in the Arctic affairs, but it does not have a direct agency in the region, except of course through its member states. Do you think its pending observer state application could be approved? Like we could see a sort of consensus among the member states of the Arctic Council. Also, what potential role could the Union play in the affairs towards a more peaceful and stable region?
So I'm Amrita Khaitan. I'm a PhD scholar in Jamia Millia Islamia. So my question is to the ambassador from Finland. So sir, you mentioned that the first priority are the interests of indigenous people, right? But how can the countries in the Arctic Circle, Arctic Council claim complete how can they claim rights over that region just because it is the rights of indigenous people that are to be prioritized? I mean, I understand that, but is it not first violation of international law? And second, it's like saying Indian Ocean impacts fishermen's and coastal areas first, so then Indian states of Tamil Nadu or Kerala should have more say in that region.
This is Kanakvali Suryanarayanan, Polar Law Scholar from India. So my question is on, we talked a lot on climate change and Trump and being in power. We had a challenge with having a ministerial declaration in 2019 because of the statement of the language on climate change was used. It was stonewalled. And we had people like Athabascans saying that these statements are not from us. So the indigenous people were not consulted then. Now we're going to have the chairship move from Norway to Denmark, which is going to put the focus on the indigenous people on Greenland. So how do you think that today we can have an Arctic consensus on such a critical matter? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn to all of you for your final words. Again, Ambassador Petri, your melancholy attracts a lot of people in the crowd. So you seem to be quite a crowd favorite here. So let me start with you and then go down the panel.
All right. First, I have to say that I spent part of my youth playing lead guitar in a rock band, and we played way too loud, and now it's getting back to me as I'm aging. I have great difficulty hearing many of the questions, but I replied to what I thought I heard. On the European Union, the EU is also an active Arctic player. It has legislative power. Part of its EU territory part of our territory is also EU territory. The EU is a global actor on climate change. It has expertise and programs of direct benefit to the Arctic region. And I would promote the EU's Arctic Forum, which will be convened back-to-back with the EU indigenous peoples for dialogue and youth dialogue. This year it will be convened in Levi, Finland on the 26th, 27 June. Everybody should be there. On the events on 2019, I just limit myself to saying, please read the 12th May text, which we hopefully will manage to approve, and you will hopefully be able to see where we are and where we are heading towards.
Ambassador Reichlich, final words?
Yes, of course, EU is an important player in the Arctic. 3 of EU members are Arctic Council members, 6 of EU members are observers in the Arctic Council. EU has its own Arctic strategy. EU invests a lot of money in the Arctic, like over €1 billion into the renewables and many, many others. So the strength of the EU, I believe, is our combined capabilities, all of the member states. But of course, we can be more efficient when it comes to the governance.
Mr. Pena.
Yes, no, I think we would like to. We would also like to see the EU playing to increase its profile in the Arctic, but maybe with a more comprehensive approach. Maybe the European Union so far has been too much focused only on sustainable development, on green transition. We would like to see the EU understand better the Arctic and tackling all the issues together, because otherwise it's difficult to have a good understanding of the Arctic if we don't address all these issues together. So maybe it's time for the EU to do a step forward in this direction.
So, just to conclude the discussions, I think there was both cautious optimism but also determination to continue to collaborate and govern this most crucial and vital region. Also, I think I like the phrasing of the scope of work by Ambassador Petri. It's a balance. It's to discover that balance of forces, balance of issues, balance of actors as we create consensus and collaboration. I just want to conclude by congratulating Norway for the work it has done, Ambassador Petri, and for wishing Denmark all the best for their presidency, because these are difficult times. The world is polarized. We are facing significant disruptions, and it is vital that we continue to protect the pole. So with that, please join me in applauding this wonderful panel.